Every time he dies, he goes back one day into the past, so he died 1,000 times. Shinpei Ejiro is a kind boy who lost his parents when he was still young and got adopted by the Kofun family. But after his adoptive sister, Ushio, drowns and dies, he comes back for her funeral, heartbroken. He cared about his adoptive sister so much that he has a dream about her in the boat while going home to the island. When he gets off the boat, he is welcomed home by his other younger adoptive sister, Mio Kofun, who's riding her bicycle which doesn't break and lands in the water. After, they walk together to the funeral home. He meets his adoptive father, Alan, and his best friend, Sue Hishigata. A light flashes behind him before Sue shows him a little girl, Shiori Kobayakawa, whom Ushio was trying to save when she died. He tells him that his father performed an autopsy on Ushio's body and it might be that she was killed. Later after the funeral, Shinpei is at home and cooking for Mio and Alan, and for the first time in 2 years since he left, they enjoy dinner together. However, Mio is seen outside by the island's only cop, Tetsu, where she's just standing there, staring at her own bedroom window. Back inside his room, Shinpei hears all about the autopsy from Sue through a phone call, and they discuss the suspicion that Ushio might have been strangled. After he hangs up the phone, Mio appears on his door and cries about Ushio's death. She mentions that she won't forgive the person who killed her big sis. Shinpei asks her if she knows anything about the murder. She says nothing and goes to her room. The next day, he goes to work at their bistro with Mio. Tetsu walks in and lets them know that the little girl, Shiori, has suddenly disappeared with no trace whatsoever. Mio begins to panic and runs out of the shop. Shinpei gets worried and goes after her. He looks for her until he finds her sitting by some closed shop, and she tells him that she is afraid Shiori might have been killed. She tells him how Shiori once told her and Ushio that she saw a person who looked exactly like her following her. A strange man, Nezu, who's a hunter, suddenly appears and explains that Shiori might have the shadow sickness, which happens when a person sees a shadow of themselves, and that she needs purification to prevent death. The man leaves and Mio confirms having heard the legend before. She tells Shinpei that she and Ushio once saw a shadow of Ushio together, and 2 days later, Ushio died. Seeing that Mio might have the shadow sickness too after seeing Ushio's shadow, they decide to go to the shrine to get her purified. Mio looks to the woods, she sees Shiori and decides to run after her. They hear a gunshot nearby and go to investigate. They find a woman whom Shinpei saw in the boat when he was coming back home, shot. Mio runs to get help. The woman tries to tell Shinpei something, but before she can get the words out, she gets shot in the head. When Shinpei looks to see who, he sees Mio's shadow holding the real Mio hostage and shoots her. She then shoots him dead too. He wakes up in the position he awoke in the first time he met the woman whose name is later revealed to be Hizuru in the boat. When he checks his phone, he realizes that he's gone back to yesterday. He still remembers everything since arriving home, but somehow it is repeating again. He recalls a book he's read called The Swamp Man, written by Ryunosuke Minakata, where the McLives the same day over and over, and the same thing happens to him. He relives the day, meets the same people, and gets the same reactions. He gets to know that Mio didn't break because they have been cut, and he remembers that Shiori will disappear with her whole family and that if everything happens the same, the shadows really do exist. He goes home, cooks dinner, and while sitting with Alan and Mio, he puts 2 and 2 together and figures out that Ushio might have been killed by a shadow too. He goes out for fresh air to think more about how Mio might get killed if things play out the same way. While sitting outside, he hears Tetsu talking on the road and sees Tetsu talking to Mio, who is just standing outside, staring at her bedroom window in her school uniform, just like the shadow which killed him at the shrine. He witnesses the shadow stab Tetsu, killing him, and from her shadow, she creates a shadow that looks like him. It touches Tetsu's corpse and makes him disappear, and then repeats his data to pretend to be him. Shinpei panics and tries to close his mouth to not breathe suspiciously heavily and scream from terror, but his phone vibrates and he's found out by both the shadows. He gets killed instantly by them and gets sent flying into the vacuum of the loop again. He wakes up right before Mio appears on her bicycle, heavy breathing and panicking. Mio comes speeding in her bicycle. He remembers that her brakes have been cut, so he tries to stop her only to be sent into the water. After the funeral, when he gets home, he calls Tetsu and tells him about a fake crime to send him to a different location at the time of his previous murder. He places his phone outside where it can record Mio's shadow when it appears. He also notices that his right eye is a different color to his left one, which it has been since he got to the island the first time. The next morning, he gets his phone and opens the video of Mio's shadow and goes to show it to Mio. She panics seeing that she is a target now that they have pieced everything about the whole thing. Mio decides to warn Shiori about her shadow which could come after her, but Shinpei stops her and goes instead. They go to Shiori's house with Shiomi. Shinpei looks around the dining area and sees shadow marks of 2 adults. He then goes upstairs to check out the children's situation. When he gets to the hallway, he sees a shadow in the dark and it appears to be Shiori. He tries to turn on the light in fear of the shadow that Shiori's shadow tries to form in the background. But Shiomi approaches him, and in that split second, the shadow retreats quickly out the window and runs away. Shinpei, left confused and overwhelmed by what is happening on the island, he remembers that the woman from the boat, Hizuru, was killed by Mio's shadow the first time. He figures that maybe she knows what's going on. He goes to work, and Tetsu yells at him for giving the wrong tip-off. They talk a bit about the incident, and Tetsu gives Shinpei Ushio's cell phone which she handed in before she died, as if she knew she was going to die. Sue comes in and they go to another place together with Mio. Shinpei decides to tell Sue about the shadows and what he's learned since. He shows him the video, and tells him that Mio needs purification to avoid death. They decide to go to the shrine the next day during the summer festival. After they arrive at the shrine, they have fun celebrating with everyone and watching fireworks go off. And in one moment, Shinpei sees Ushio in the crowd. He leaves his friends and runs after her. When he catches up to her, she goes into the water at the beach. She turns around and sees him, runs to him, cheering, and hugs him because she missed him. He gets scared as he saw her in the casket before her cremation. But she doesn't remember anything at all. She tries to go to the festival to see everyone because she misses Mio, but they get spotted by Mio's shadow. They hide from it and he continues to ask her questions that only Ushio would know. She answers all of them correctly. Mio calls to tell him to come and witness the ceremony. He takes Ushio to hide so she's not found out by anyone because they know her as a dead person. He goes back to witness Sue getting rejected by Mio. Ushio in a mask comes out to try and cheer Sue up. Mio immediately recognizes her and starts to panic when Ushio takes off her mask. The entire group gets frightened. Shinpei grabs Ushio by the hand and tells them that she's not the real Ushio, and she should quit acting like she is. Ushio tells the other 3 to run, and Shinpei starts to change into a shadow. When the real Shinpei tried to go back to his group to watch the farewell ceremony, he encountered Mio's shadow, and it attacked him. She scanned and copied him to form a new Shinpei. But when she tried to kill him, Shadow Shinpei stopped her because if he died, he'd just come back. Shadow Mio holds Shinpei down while his shadow goes back to the ceremony to pose as the real one. The Shadow Mio prepares to torture Shinpei, but she gets shot by Hizuru. She disappears but quickly reappears behind Hizuru to attack her, but Hizuru shoots her flat shadow on the ground. Hizuru then introduces herself as Ryunosuke Nagumo, whom Shinpei recognizes as the name of the author of the Swamp Man. They hear a sound and they quickly hide. They see Ushio quickly passing by, following Shinpei from when he left her. In the clear, Ryunosuke tells him how she tells the difference between shadows and real people by their shadows. He asks her for help with helping his friends not get killed by his shadow self. He runs up the stairs and finds a gruesome bloodbath, with Tokiko talking to a deformed-looking 4-armed shadow. She turns around and apologizes to him as the shadow stabs her from behind. He looks over to the side, and he sees Mio protected by Sue, who gets killed by his own shadow, which also kills Mio. Ryunosuke shoots the shadow, but the shadow copies her and shoots her back. The shadow grabs Shinpei, claiming he has the eye of their mother, which can manipulate time. Shinpei witnesses the large group of people disappear, along with Mio, while Ushio struggles to not get swallowed up by the shadow's flat hands. The shadow raises its hands into the sky where a red crystal floats and a girl with white hair and a red left eye is. It casts a large shadow that travels to cover the whole island and erases all the people. Shinpei, having figured out some of his power, asks Ryunosuke to shoot him, but when she tries, the shadow tries to kill her. Ushio jumps up and punches the shadow, and Ryunosuke successfully kills Shinpei. Shinpei wakes up at the point when he and Mio are walking to the funeral home after he got hit into the water by Mio's bicycle. He gets home and writes down everything that's happened so far, and vows to save everyone before he loops back after everyone's gone. Ushio also loops back and wakes up at the beach on the day of her funeral. Shinpei decides to do everything he did the first time. He also talks to Shiori about her seeing her shadow before, but he quickly realizes that she and her parents are shadows. He figures out when Mio was copied into a shadow based on the underwear. When he gets to the funeral, he asks questions about the shadows and about Ryunosuke. Alan gives him the number that Hizuru gave him, which is a code that Alan can't figure out. He solves the code and calls the number. The phone is answered by Nezu, the hunting man who once told him and Mio about shadows. Nezu tells him to go to the funeral home so that they can meet. He arrives and Nezu instantly snipes his shadow to be sure he's not a fake. They meet and discuss what they know while going inside his hiding place. Shinpei sees Ryunosuke and asks for an autograph. Hizuru never uses her author's name, and Shinpei didn't recognize her as the author when they were traveling to the island. She figures that maybe he might have time traveled, and he confirms it. Shinpei gives her his theory about what's happening, how he started the loops, and everything he knows. He also references the Swamp Man, and Hizuru tells him that the book is based on the true events of the shadow that killed her whole family. They devise a plan to go and kill some shadows, starting with Shiori's family. They arrive at the house and she listens to a voice note of herself detailing exactly what she needs to do. Confusing Shinpei, Nezu tells him that she's not herself when she's doing these things. Her twin brother lives inside of her and she alternates between the two personalities to do her work properly, which is why she goes by both her real name and her brother's name, which is also her author's name. She goes inside and kills the family, but fails to kill Shiori, who escapes through a window, and they are forced to go to Plan B. Nezu shoots at Shiori's shadow but misses, but Shinpei grabs her when she's about to pass by. Nezu comes and nails her shadow down to prevent her from moving, allowing Hizuru to kill the shadow. Hizuru finally introduces herself and her alter ego. Shinpei tells them about Mio's shadow, which is to appear that night, and they go to wait outside to nail and kill her. Shinpei goes inside while they wait for Mio's shadow to appear. He finds Mio cooking and he takes over because eating her food is the same as eating poison. She goes to wash her face. He hears a stomach rumble and thinks that it's Mio hungry, but when he turns to look, he sees Ashio instead. He panics when he sees that she's appeared before the festival, and she tells him that she wants to go. When Mio comes back, he hides her because she's supposed to be dead, but here she is, wandering around town in her swimsuit. He tells her to tiptoe to his room so he can bring her food. Alan comes back and instead of eating dinner together like in the previous loops, he takes food for Ashio in his room. He contemplates killing Shadow Ashio, but he hesitates. He can't bring himself to kill the person he cares about the most. Even though she's a shadow, she protected him from the four-armed shadow in the last loop. Mio comes to his door to take his plates to wash them. He quickly hides Ashio, and even though she's suspicious, she leaves. Right after, she opens the door again, but this time, it's the shadow. It tries to stab Shinpei, but Ashio gets in the way and gets stabbed. She stabs Ashio's flat shadow on the hand, hurting her. Shinpei opens the window to signal Nezu and Hizuru of the shadow's presence. Nezu shoots her in the head and Shinpei stabs its shadow, killing it. Hizuru comes in and tries to kill Ashio, but Shinpei stops her immediately, pleading for mercy. Hizuru lets it be after some hesitation and heals her hand. She then asks Shinpei to stay out of the hunt because Ashio could compromise their every move. He goes to the beach with Sue, who tells him that he believes that Ashio was killed, and before he finishes his sentence, Ashio appears and finishes it for him. They reveal everything to Sue, and Ashio unlocks her phone to see Ashio's last recorded video before she died. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.